We've learned that in order to maintain a specific sequence of whole steps and half steps, we have to add sharps or flats to the notes present in order to keep the major sound of the major scale. Let's review that the major scale is made up of the following sequence of whole steps and half steps. Whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. We built the G scale before. Starting here on G, we did a whole step which took us to A, a whole step which took us to B, a half step which took us to C, a whole step that took us to D, a whole step that took us to E, and then in order to get another whole step, we had to add a sharp on F. And that enabled us to get that whole step, and then having the F sharp there, that built in the half step to G. That means the same would be true on the F in the bass clef for the scale to be accurate starting on G. The cool thing about music is that if we have a piece of music that is always going to center around G instead of C, that means we're going to constantly need lots of F sharps. And either we can always write them so that every time we come along an F, we add a sharp to it, or we can add that sharp at the very beginning of the music next to the clef, and it's called a time or key signature. The key signature indicates that the notes that have sharps or flats at the very beginning of the piece will automatically make all of those notes sharped or flatted according to what is in the key signature. This area right here in the treble and the bass clefs indicates the key signature, and it will always show the sharps or flats that need to be in a specific score. Let's look at A for a second. We did A before, and we had to add a few sharps in order to make it work. Let's walk through it again. We need a whole step from A to B, that's built in. A whole step now from B to C. Since there is no black note between B and C, we will need to add one C sharp to that C in order to make it a whole step. Now I need a half step. Well, since it's already C sharp, to D makes it a half step. D to E is a whole step, that's good. Now E to F would normally be a half step, but I need it to be a whole step. Therefore I'm going to add a sharp to the F. And again, from F sharp to G would only be a half step, but I need it to be a whole step, so I add yet another sharp to the G, making it G sharp, and then finally I have my half step from G sharp to A. So again, I can add those same sharps to the notes in the bass clef so that it produces the same scale. But the wonderful thing about key signatures is that instead of having all of these sharps on the notes, I can put all of these sharps in a specific order and pattern at the beginning of the music in what we call the key signature. Once those sharps are in the key signature, I could actually erase each of these sharps because they are no longer required. I still have to play them sharp, but the fact that they are sharp is inferred because they are present in the key signature. Just for fun, we're going to do one starting on a black note. We're going to start this scale on E flat. Now, a rule that we maybe didn't discuss before, but is worthy of mentioning right now, is that when you build any scale, you only use each letter once. So you don't have A sharp, B. It's got to be A, B flat, C. We always go in alphabetical order, starting on whichever letter of the alphabet and repeating when we reach the top, and going back to A. So, if I start on E flat and I follow the same sequence, E flat to F is a whole step. F to G is a whole step. Next, I need a half step. That half step from G to A is going to be a whole step. And so in order to make it a half step, I need to add a flat on A to make it A flat. Now that I'm on A flat, I can go, so that's my half step, A flat to B. Ooh, that would actually be a step and a half. In order to make sure that it's not too wide of a step, I need to add a flat on B so that it becomes B flat. Next I go from B flat to C. That's a whole step because there's no black note between B and C, but I've flatted the B flat. That still leaves B in between B flat and C to make it a whole step. And then C to D is a whole step. And then finally D to E flat is a half step. So the flats that I added in this case, we started out with E flat, and then we added an A flat, and we added a B flat. Which means that my key signature for the key of E flat is going to have a B flat, an E flat, and an A flat. And again, we'll discuss at a later date how to know what order and octave these sharps and flats are supposed to appear in the key signature. But that is how you build a key signature from the major scale.